Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of WE3Live. Today, we're back with a fantastic episode, Rise of the EV Era. Southern California Edison has set an ambitious goal to electrify 70% of its transportation sector by 2045. Today, we have the pleasure of being joined by the Director of Electrification for SCE, Carter Prescott, and joined again with our moderator, George Hunt, the Chief Strategy Officer of Smart Energy Water. We're looking forward to a great conversation, and we won't waste any more time. George, I'll hand it over to you and Carter.
Cheers, Jason. Thank you very much, and welcome, Carter. It's such a privilege to share this platform with you today. How are you doing? It's nice to see you.
I'm doing great, George. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. You're
welcome. And as Jason said, this is a great platform or great channel for us to talk about some really interesting topics. And this one is an exciting one. This one is relevant. We're seeing lots of impact around the world. We're seeing lots of change, lots of disruption, and lots of ambition being set by car manufacturing companies, energy companies, and large organizations as well. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have you share this platform with us today. As Jason said, the topic that we've got the opportunity to discuss is the rise of the EV era. So the rise of the electric vehicle era. And we sort of know that electric vehicles have been around for some time. And I heard recently that the first electric vehicle is probably almost 100 years ago, which I hadn't realized. And it just didn't take off for various reasons. Plus it was disrupted by the Ford Model T coming out. So the innovation or the thought was there, many years ago, and then something came along that provided convenience, it provided cost-effective travel, and that took over. We're moving to a point where I think now we're at another brink of a real change towards electrification, towards eMobility, and towards the integration of how we get power from our energy companies in order to support that, and how we deploy infrastructure. So really interesting time. So as I say, I'm thrilled to be joined by you today. I'll just do a brief introduction, and I'll hand over to you to introduce yourself. But just by way of a very quick introduction to the audience, Carter is responsible for eMobility and building electrification at Southern California Edison, one of North America's largest electric utilities. He's been with SC Edison for almost 20 years and now leads all of SC's vehicle and building electrification programs and services. This is a really large, really significant program for SC Edison. And as Jason mentioned, the team's mission is to help California electrify 75% of its transportation, which equates to getting 26 million passenger electric vehicles on the road and converting 70% of space and water heating in buildings by 2045. A fantastic, amazing opportunity here and thing to do. So as I say, it's great to have you here today on this fascinating topic. Do you want to quickly introduce a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Happy to be here again. As you mentioned, my responsibilities at Southern California Edison, tremendously exciting opportunity and a great time to be with the utility and in the utility industry. As you mentioned, I've been with the company for almost 20 years. It'll be 18 at the end of this year. And I've spent most of my time in finance-related roles, supporting customer service, transmission, distribution. Also spent some time in corporate consolidation in the Treasury Department. And then working on my own development, saw the opportunity to be in a more operational role, which I had the opportunity to be the successful candidate in eMobility operations at the time, and spent a couple years there. And mainly the responsibilities were the successful deployment of all of our transportation electrification pilots and programs. And then most recently, I was promoted to Director of eMobility, Director of Electrification, having responsibility for transportation electrification and building electrification. So it's been a great ride.
That's a fantastic title, Director of Electrification. That's
it's got a good ring to it.
I can just imagine that on your business card. That's fantastic. All right. We when we run these sessions, we quite like to start with getting a little bit under the surface of who you are and where you come from as a person and as well as a professional. So we've got a few speed questions here for you, just to get us going. So the first one, and you partly answered this, but I'd quite like to hear you define it again, which is, did energy or did electrification find you, or did you find electrification?
So I think it's a little bit of both, actually. I had this opportunity had come about, and I was really interested in it, and I really hesitated on actually applying for the position because I just didn't feel that I was qualified, particularly in transportation electrification, without having that technical background. And some of my peers said, "Hey, you have a lot of really great experience that you can bring to the table." In addition, my husband and I own a senior care company outside of my work at SCE, and it's been tremendously successful over the last 5 years. And one of the things that made me a competitive candidate was having that almost startup experience and being able to do, we refer to eMobility as almost a startup in a 125-year-old plus utility. So it's been a great opportunity, and it's been amazing.
I think that's really great insight about the kind of mindset that you would need to take on a challenge like this, and that startup mentality, that idea that nothing is impossible, that idea that you can remove all the barriers and move quickly and be agile in your decision making. Fantastic. I also like being a startup within a 125-year utility. You've got to be a little bit crazy to take on that challenge, I think. So my next question is linked to that, which is, tell me something that you personally believe that other people think is crazy.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I tell people that I'm changing the world, they often look at me and they're like, "What do you mean you're changing the world? How are you changing the world?" And it may not be just me personally, it's definitely not me personally, but it's the work that we're doing is absolutely changing the world for the better. And to be a part of that is incredibly rewarding, and it's almost like a mission and a calling. And to work with people that are so driven by the work that we're doing makes it incredibly fun.
No, it's absolutely the right type of crazy, and I think you are changing the world. I think you're pioneering a new future, and I take my hat off to what you're doing, and I take my hat off to what SC Edison are doing by taking this so seriously as well. So next question for you, just before we get on to the real meat of the topic here, is put yourself back a few years. What advice would you give a young Carter if you knew then what you know now?
I think life goes by really fast. Stop and make sure that you're enjoying the present, because before you know it, the future, it comes really quickly. I'm always one of those people that am really focused on what's next, what's next, what's next. And I would probably tell myself to stop and enjoy the present more.
Now that's fantastic advice. We asked a similar question last week of the person on this panel, and the advice was, don't worry about what people think, just get on and enjoy the ride. It's a fairly similar kind of feeling, and I think that's great advice to anybody listening, whatever age you are and stage in your career. So thank you for that. My last speed question is, just imagine you had a billboard that you could 7 billion people on the planet could see. What would you put on it? What would you write on that billboard?
I think if you haven't driven an EV, get out and drive one. Whether it's driving a friend's electric vehicle or test driving an electric vehicle. I recently purchased an electric vehicle myself and had not driven one, had been in the field for a couple of years. And I can't tell you what an amazing experience. It's truly different, quiet. It's just it's a great driving experience. And I think once people have the opportunity to drive an EV, their mindset will absolutely change.
No going back after you tried that then. All right. All right. So let's get on to the main key part of the topic. We will get an opportunity through the time to answer any audience questions. So if you've got a question that you would like me to ask Carter, please post a question. So let's talk a little. Let's start by talking a little bit more about SCE and the eMobility and building electrification strategy and the program that you're running. I'm really keen to hear about how that strategy came about, how the nature of the program was defined, and what kind of backing have you got from the board and the other sort of forms of stakeholders and governance around the organization. So the origins of the program, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. So California has some really aggressive, ambitious GHG reduction goals. And so we knew as an electric utility, we really had to get on board to help make this happen. And so we created a white paper known as Pathway 2045. And it's really our utility's North Star for how we're going to make all of this wonderful work happen. And so the eMobility team was started first in 2018. It was formed there. The board approved the organization of this new group. And we found that transportation electrification was in a pilot stage back then, and it was happening throughout various parts of the company. And there wasn't really one group or organization that was responsible to make things happen. And so we quickly learned that we need to form that organization to create that central eMobility organization to be responsible to make all of this happen. So we did, and the group has grown since then. It's doubled in size since 2018. I was a part of one of the first hires there in eMobility operations. And then in addition, as part of our Pathway 2045, you mentioned in your opening comments, we do need to electrify 70% of space and water heating by 2045. So the Building Electrification Group was also formed probably about a year and a half ago. And so the electrification director, which is my current role now, has both transportation electrification and building electrification. So really this is, began with the state's GHG reduction goals, our ability to be a part of that, create our white paper with Pathway 2045 to help lead this way, this mission to electrify transportation sector as well as building electrification.
Fantastic. Can you tell me a little bit about how the organization has embraced that strategy? What has it done to culture? What is it? You mentioned that Pathway 2045 has become a North Star. Can you tell me a little bit about, how has the organization embraced that in terms of its culture, its purpose, its ambition and its goals and so on, from an individual point of view, as much as a corporate one?
Right. I think, it's definitely new work. It's exciting. It's leading the way in many ways. And one of our taglines at Southern California is leading the way in energy and electricity. And so I think the organization has embraced it really well. It's definitely an exciting place to be. There's a lot of excitement from employees to join the organization just because the work we're doing is really the first of its kind. So I mentioned earlier, startup in a 125-year-old utility. We've been doing work for over 125 years. This type of work is new, cutting edge, never been done before. We have problems and obstacles that we've never discovered. And so being a part of the solution to make all of that happen is not only exciting, but it's really powerful. So I think overall, the utility has embraced it really well. There's a lot of excitement to be in both transportation electrification and now building electrification.
Fantastic. And you mentioned that a lot of people are interested in joining the program. What kind of talent and what kind of roles have you managed to attract into the program? You mentioned your own background at the beginning, which was, a broad background around finance and around other things. So what kind of people do you now have in your team that are contributing to this?
It's a great question. We have, I would say it's a great mix of individuals. You know, we're an engineering organization, just being in the utility sector. So we have some engineers, we have folks that have clean energy backgrounds and have come from, you know, the transportation electrification sector outside of the utility. We have some new talent, both internal talent as well, like myself. We have folks that have, you know, accounting and finance backgrounds. It's really a wide mix because I think to make this happen, you need people to be thinking about all aspects of the company. And so it's really beneficial to have folks that have experience with all aspects of the company so that we're really thinking about all the important things that we need to make this happen.
And what about the attracting talent into the utility sector from the top universities or top, you know, educational institutions? Are you finding that this program is acting as a magnet for that kind of talent as well?
Absolutely. There's a lot of, I'll say, younger individuals that are really interested in clean energy and making a difference in the world, as I mentioned earlier. And so we see a lot of interest from outside, both, you know, graduates, you know, students that are just graduating to folks that, you know, have worked in automotive, for instance. A lot of interest from outside. You know, when we post positions, we have so many candidates that it's incredibly, you know, it's an incredibly competitive process. And so folks, you know, really take pride in being part of electrification at SCE.
No, I love that because just the impact of having a North Star in an organization or a purpose like this is so powerful. Just before we move into a little bit more detail about what you've done, I wouldn't mind knowing, in a similar vein, what impact has it had on the partners of SCE, the partner ecosystem around SCE? Has it had an impact on how they work with you as well, or the partners that you attract?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work with various stakeholders to make this happen, from, you know, charging vendors to installation vendors, also our other utilities. So there's two other investor-owned utilities within the state of California, PG&E and SDG&E. We work closely with them. We work really closely with our California Air Resources Board, as well as our Public Utilities Commission. So it's been a tremendous cross-functional, cross-organizational, cross-company venture that it takes so many different stakeholders to really come together to make this happen. You know, we found that this industry a couple years ago was incredibly nascent. I think it's where building electrification is now, and it's grown so much in that time.
Okay, we've got a question that's come in from the audience, which I think is now is an opportune moment to ask it, I think, which is, we talked a little bit about EV, and I think just as we were getting ready for this call, I was saying how impressed I was with Elon Musk's SpaceX program last night, managing to land Starship 15. But we had an Elon Musk moment around the EV concept a little while ago when Tesla gained traction, etc. Do we need a similar Elon? So the question that's come in, do we need an Elon Musk moment around building electrification as well?
I think that would really help a lot. You know, building electrification, we know that heat pumps, you know, electric heat pumps are the answer to both electrifying space and water heating. We're finding that cities are, you know, changing their REACH codes for all electric buildings in the future, but that's going to only really deal with new construction. And so we know that retrofitting is one of the key things that we need to figure out. And we're in the process right now of figuring out what that looks like. You know, traditionally, utility infrastructure goes up to the meter. And in transportation electrification, particularly in our programs, we actually also own and install the customer side of the meter, which is from the meter to the charging station. Similarly, with building electrification, sometimes the meter's not far enough, and we know, for instance, the panel needs to be upgraded. So that could be considered customer side infrastructure. And so how do we handle that? Does the utility own the panel? Do we service the panel in the future? Does that create any risk or issues for us? And it's also an opportunity. So I think there definitely needs to be movement in the building electrification space, particularly with retrofitting existing infrastructure.
No, I totally agree with you. I think we're seeing examples around the world of a water energy nexus, you might say, which is where, you know, electrification, energy management, consumption management, a circular economy is starting to sort of raise its profile, and also be seen on sustainability and net zero programs that organizations have set up. So no, thanks very much for that. I wouldn't mind just, you mentioned a little bit about, well, we talked a little bit about the impact of the program in the organization and its culture. I'm quite interested in what has been the impact in how you provide energy around the grid. What are SCE doing in order to accommodate increased demand across the grid and increased participation from people putting energy into the grid, either from their vehicles or from solar panels or renewable systems that they might have? What's happening on the operational side of SCE is probably the core of my question.
Yeah, it's really changing the way that we do things. You know, our grid is constantly evolving and changing. And so we really need to think about things differently, and the effects or impacts of transportation electrification or bringing additional load onto the grid as a result of electrifying vehicles. We have internally what we refer to as our transportation electrification roadmap, and it has some near-term and longer-term activities, and I'll cover a couple of those. It's essentially a strategic, holistic view and work plan for transmission and distribution to really enhance planning, engineering, operations, processes, to make sure that we have timely, safe, reliable, and affordable integration of EV charging infrastructure. So we know that when customers want to electrify their fleets, you know, sometimes in many instances, it can take up to 10 years to build a new substation. And so we know that customers aren't going to be, not going to be happy with waiting that length of time. So we really need to incorporate areas of the grid where we see additional load coming on to the grid to make sure that we're planning ahead for that infrastructure. We haven't seen any impacts thus far. We've been able to keep up with demand, but we're really focused on things like strategic grid planning, where we're enhancing our forecasting and our grid planning processes to partner with regulators and customers to stay ahead of EV adoption, and also providing versatile service options for our customers. So assessing and providing alternative or versatile service options to meet their needs. Updating design standards, so continually improving distribution design standards as the EV market and the technology evolves, and then streamlining our processes for the interconnection process for EV projects, both within our programs and non-program, in preparation to increase the number of EVs. And then lastly, there's a focus around operational readiness. And so we really want to continue to work on technology standards and policy for things like vehicle to grid integration.
Yeah. Well, that was a fantastic segue into how are you incentivizing customers to embrace this technology, and how are you integrating your services with what they need. So I think that gives us a little bit of an opportunity to talk about, do you think governments and states are doing enough around putting charging infrastructure in all the right places? Because, you know, wherever you go, that's one of the constraints to adoption, isn't it?
Right. So range anxiety is real. I'll tell you, as an EV owner, before I had my charging station installed at my home, you know, it was, wow, do I have enough charging to do all the things I need? And, you know, where's the nearest charging to me, you know, at my home or at work, wherever I'm going. So I definitely see that utilities play a big role in EV adoption, and I think we need to help move things along. I think we absolutely, without the utilities helping to make this happen, until the market gets to a point where it's growing on its own, we really play an important role to make EV adoption happen. We're focused at Southern California Edison to install, charging stations both for, light duty vehicles, passenger vehicles, as well as, medium duty and heavy duty vehicles for our customers, so big trucks. And so we really have programs that are designed to help make that happen. We also have initiated 2 pilots recently where we're going to be installing charging infrastructure and charging stations at schools K through 12, as well as at state parks and beaches. And one of the issues around state parks and beaches is there typically is not a lot of utility infrastructure around a state park and a beach, right? It's usually an open area. So we're looking at technologies like solar and battery storage for EV charging stations that could be potentially deployed at state parks and beaches.
Wow. I mean, it just gets even more and more interesting the deeper you go into this. You've got a unique perspective from the work that you're doing at SCE. I'm really interested in you must look around the world across North America, across other countries, and see what they're doing. How would you compare what you're doing in California and how the state of California is reacting to this challenge or responding to this challenge with what you've seen around the world? Because I can't believe how fast the time has gone, but we can't miss this last part about what you're seeing elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think that California is leading the way when it comes to electrification within the United States. We've seen some really great developments. There's been a lot of progress in other areas of the nation, such as New York. They recently approved a $700 million statewide program to deploy charging infrastructure there. We're also, we talk to utilities across the nation. I can't tell you how many utilities, Hawaii as an example, have reached out to us and asked us questions about successes, challenges, obstacles, things that we've learned, things that they should be aware of as they're starting to create their own programs within their state. So not only are we doing work in California and making a difference for the world, we really are by working through and sharing best practices with others throughout the nation. So a lot of movement.
Fantastic. And I've got 2 more questions to you that just before I move on to my last question, I'm really keen on hearing from you. What are you most proud of in terms of the achievements to date? And what are you most excited about in terms of the horizon that you can see ahead of you?
I'm really proud of the work that we've accomplished. One other example, Southern California Edison is the program administrator for the California Clean Fuel Reward Program, which is a statewide on-the-hood EV rebate. We worked with over 40 utilities throughout the nation to make this happen, and the California Air Resources Board, as well as our Public Utilities Commission. And to get 42 utilities to agree on things is not always easy. We implemented that program late last year. That's one of my proudest accomplishments. And then what was the other part of the question? I'm sorry.
It's what are you most excited about as you look on the on the horizon that's in front of you?
Absolutely. I'm excited to, scale our programs. We really, we've been doing some pilots and scaling our light duty infrastructure program as well as our medium duty, heavy duty program. I'm really excited about that. I'm also incredibly excited to share some of those best practices that we've learned on the transportation electrification side with the building electrification side. And I'm really excited about what progress we're going to make in the near term with building electrification.
I love that. So my last question, and I'm so grateful for the time today. I just can't believe how fast it's gone. But my last question is, in a future WE3 discussion, we're going to talk about the rise of EV in developing countries, areas where there's severe smog or where it's similar to California, but probably more acute to health as well. What advice would you have to, if you talk to one of your peers in a developing country about how they might adopt and embrace this amazing technology? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think for new infrastructure, new buildings, it's really important for us to think about, installing charging equipment or having building charging equipment capable so that it can be installed. Retrofitting existing buildings, particularly multifamily units, is challenging just because of the way that they're set up. And so we have some best practices that we've learned there. So it really depends on, the demographic of the country, but absolutely, it's been an amazing ride. Have lots to share, and we do that with many folks across the nation. And we've also talked with some folks outside of the world. There's other countries outside of the United States that are they're further ahead than us. So I think there's things that we can learn from them as well.
Fantastic. I think our time is up. I can't believe that. But thank you so much. I found that fascinating, absolutely fascinating, and I'm so impressed with your passion, your ambition, and the opportunity that you've got to really make a difference on something that matters so much. So thank you so much for joining us today, and it's been great to talk to you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're really welcome. And I think we're going to hand over to Lowell now, who's I think going to sum up some of those golden nugget points that you shared with us. So thanks very much, and hope that was okay.